Welcome to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast for couples who struggle with infertility and want to fulfill their dreams of becoming parents. In this podcast, you'll learn actionable strategies to deal with infertility from Dr. Michael Chapman, or Prof as he's affectionately known. Prof is the co-founder of IVF Australia and is a leading Australian infertility specialist who has helped over 3,000 couples realise their dreams of becoming parents. To access previous episodes packed with ideas, solutions and tips that actually work, head over to Dr. Chapman's IVF podcast on iTunes. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1-800-111-483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.
That first cry of a baby born after the long journey of IVF remains one of the most beautiful experiences in the world. As an obstetrician and an IVF specialist, I've had the privilege of experiencing this over many thousands of times in my long career, but I still remain moved by each baby's first cry. It signifies the end of a long journey and the beginning of a new life. This is Professor Michael Chapman, co-founder of IVF Australia and host of the IVF Journey podcast. Thanks for tuning in. To access all the previous episodes, head over to my website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu. You'll also be able to find the various services that we provide at IVF Australia. So one of the problems I think IVF has created, particularly as it's not highly successful on a month-by-month basis, is media coverage of what are alleged to be new discoveries. The media loves them, and the reason the media loves them is, I presume, is that the population reads newspapers because they love to hear that the world is changing, that somebody somewhere has found something that will alter the lives of either themselves or others, and particularly infertile couples, when they read an article, and there's one recently out of Toledo in the US, some discovery about a new structure within the sperm that they claim may explain and be allowed to produce higher success rates for infertile couples. And it really is extending a scientific discovery into something, a fairy tale. And we get this all the time with major breakthroughs. Why do people announce things? Well, there are a couple of reasons why people announce things. The first one is, if you're a researcher and you are doing something, you want the world to know about it. So, if you achieve something that's a bit new, it's rewarding for you as an individual, and the university, in fact, encourages it to go to the media and say, we've discovered something new. And the first thing the media says, will it improve fertility rates? And no matter what you say as a researcher, and however conservative you are in terms of your comment, it will be construed around as a major breakthrough that may bring the opportunity for some patients who've never been able to get pregnant before to get pregnant. That goes into the media, and so people reading it think, oh, that's fantastic. And the guy who did the research thinks he's great because he's got his name in lights. So that's one reason. That guy's also quite keen about having a name in lights, because he'll get asked to a conference and to give the talk to other experts in the field. He'll also potentially be using that publicity as part of his efforts to get more research funding from the university or from outside bodies. I'm a high-profile person now because I'm in the media, and therefore I'll get more funding. So, good reasons to do it. It becomes slightly more sinister, however, when we move into the commercial world of IVF, and certainly we are criticised for this. criticised for announcing breakthroughs under the banner of one or other of the fertility specialists or fertility groups. And the reason that that's happening is that, again, what they're fighting for is patients to come to them rather than to another clinic. And what they're trying to say is, we're a better clinic because we get breakthroughs in IVF. 95% of breakthroughs have subsequently been proven to be nothing more than hype. And that hype is a major problem. The marketeers will twist results to make things look better than they really are. The media lap it up because, again, it comes back to the community. They like hearing good news stories. But unfortunately, it does present the problem of misrepresentation to our actual fertility patients. The ACCC are very concerned about this sort of publicity, and so is the Fertility Society of Australia. And certainly during my time as president of the FSA, we have introduced a code of practice in relation to these stories. Clinics are not allowed to announce a breakthrough unless it has been published in a peer-reviewed magazine or has been presented at a conference where the selection of their talk has been chosen by peers and it's been assessed by peers. And I think in the last 12 months since we brought that in, the number of, in quotation marks, breakthroughs has actually declined substantially. So I'm very pleased that patients are not being misled by alleged breakthroughs. And optimistic views like this Toledo group being quoted as this may substantially improve the outcome for men with male fertility. There's no evidence to support it. It's great that they've found a new discovery, but it'll be years before we know whether it actually makes any difference. I said that this had been going on for years, and I'd said certainly over my time frame of 35 years in IVF, the number of times patients have come to me and actually said, but I read in the newspaper that, if you stand on your head in the corner, you'll improve your pregnancy rates. Should I do that? And you go and look at the paper and the publicity, and it was just garbage. People claim that you could put eggs and sperm in the uterus and they would find their way to each other and create an embryo in the uterus after ovulation naturally. Then the first study came along and it was 10 patients and they got 50% pregnancy rate, which in 1990, when that was published, people went, and of course the people who did the next 20 patients got no pregnancies. So people publishing on the basis of very small numbers it needs to be viewed with great suspicion, and there've been multiple commentaries like that. And to be honest, the only major breakthrough, perhaps I'll call it breakthroughs, in infertility, which really made a step forward in massively increasing pregnancy rates, was ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, which was first reported in 1992 by an Italian working in a Belgian IVF unit. And that has changed the world in terms of male fertility. For men with low sperm counts or no sperm, we were saying up till that point, the only way for you to have children is donor sperm. We can now treat all those patients and use the sperm just by having a single one to inject into the egg. The next major breakthrough was probably blastocysts. So our capacity to grow an embryo up to 5 days in the laboratory really turned the tide in terms of pregnancy rates per embryo transfer. We moved from transferring on day 3 when we really didn't know whether those embryos were even going to make day 5 and attach to the uterus. But by keeping in the laboratory for 5 days, the best embryos declare themselves. And so when we transfer those embryos, they've got a greater chance of a pregnancy. People talk about genetic diagnosis as being a breakthrough, and certainly for couples who have inherited diseases or carriers of hereditary diseases, The fact that we can now choose an embryo that will never be affected is a huge breakthrough. But that's a very tiny part of the population. I have to say that I publicly, in the last 5 years, on a number of occasions, said we would be testing every embryo because that's the way we would improve pregnancy rates. I've been proven wrong, as has virtually the whole of the world. It's not the Holy Grail. It's certainly, if you've got a whole collection of embryos available, choosing the best ones and not going through cycle after cycle of failure is a benefit. But in terms of actually ending up with a live baby, it hasn't been the big advance that it was hailed as. So, life goes on, and there will continue to be, in quotation marks, breakthroughs announced, but be very careful, because they're not always going to be true, and the hope that they are alleged to carry, in most cases, won't change the world. And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu.
Thank you for listening to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast which helps couples negotiate their way through the IVF journey, all the way to parenthood. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1800 111 483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.